The fluorescent lights of the 42nd floor hummed with that particular frequency that made my temples throb after 14-hour days. I pressed my fingertips against my eyes, trying to massage away the exhaustion that had become my constant companion since joining Whitmore and Associates 6 months ago. The law firm's glass-walled conference rooms gleamed under the harsh lighting, each one a testament to the kind of corporate power I'd once dreamed of wielding. Now, as I gathered the scattered contracts from our latest client meeting, I wondered if dreams were worth the cost of living them. The merger documents felt heavier than they should have, each page representing millions of dollars in transactions I helped facilitate, but would never benefit from. My reflection in the conference room's floor-to-ceiling windows looked pale and drawn, my blonde hair pulled back in the severe bun that had become my signature since Mr. E. Whitmore's assistant had made it clear that professional appearance matters more than comfort in this firm. The October rain lashed against the windows 42 floors above Manhattan, each droplet racing its neighbor toward an invisible finish line. I found myself oddly mesmerized by their chaotic descent, perhaps because it mirrored my own rapid fall from law school idealism to corporate reality. The city sprawled beneath us, a glittering maze of ambition and compromise that I was still learning to navigate. "Emma, you're still here?" Marcus, one of the junior partners, appeared in the doorway with his usual mixture of concern and calculation. He was one of the few people at the firm who seemed to remember I was human, though I suspected his kindness came with its own agenda. "It's past 9. Even Whitmore went home an hour ago." I nodded toward the stack of documents. "Albanian Import Corporation needs these reviewed by tomorrow morning. Apparently their timeline doesn't accommodate sleep." The words came out more bitter than I'd intended, but Marcus either didn't notice or chose to ignore it. "The Albanian deal," he repeated, something flickering across his expression too quickly for me to read. "Right. Well, don't stay too much longer. This place gets strange after 10. Strange was one way to put it. The building transformed after business hours, its gleaming corporate facade giving way to something more sinister. Security guards with hard eyes and expensive suits that didn't quite fit right. Cleaning crews that worked in absolute silence. Visitors who used the service elevators and never appeared on any appointment logs I could access. But the Albanian Import Corporation file had been my white whale for weeks. Every time I tried to trace the actual structure of their business, I hit walls. Legal ones, digital ones, and the kind of walls that came with Marcus casually mentioning I shouldn't dig too deep into certain client backgrounds. The company imported luxury goods according to their paperwork. Art, antiquities, specialty foods. The kind of high-end items that justified the astronomical fees they paid our firm. What nagged at me were the inconsistencies. Shell companies within shell companies, bank accounts that traced to countries I couldn't pronounce, and transaction amounts that seemed wildly disproportionate to the goods described. My law school professors had drilled into us that when something looked wrong, it usually was. But they'd never mentioned what to do when that wrong thing paid your salary. I stuffed the contracts into my briefcase, along with the lingering questions I wasn't supposed to ask. The elevator bank was empty when I reached it, the hallway stretching behind me like a tunnel of expensive carpet and muted corporate art. I pressed the down button and tried not to think about the fact that I'd seen more of this building's interior than my own apartment over the past month. The elevator arrived with a soft chime, its brass doors reflecting my tired face back at me. I stepped inside, pressing the parking garage button, and watched the numbers begin their slow descent. 42, 41, 40. The familiar ritual of ending another day in a job that paid well, but felt like slow poisoning. That's when the elevator shuddered to a halt between the 39th and 40th floors. The lights flickered once, twice, then settled into a dimmer emergency setting that cast everything in an amber glow. I pressed the call button, then pressed it again when nothing happened. The digital display showed only Ino, where the floor number should be. "Great," I muttered, pulling out my phone. No signal. Of course. I was reaching for the emergency phone when I heard it. the sound of the elevator shaft access panel being forced open somewhere above me. Metal scraping against metal, followed by the unmistakable sound of someone moving in the space that definitely wasn't designed for human occupancy. Every instinct I possessed screamed danger. People didn't climb into elevator shafts unless they were running from something worse than falling 39 stories. I backed against the far wall of the elevator car, my briefcase clutched against my chest like a leather shield, and tried to remember if I'd ever been in a situation that might have prepared me for this. The access panel in the elevator ceiling shifted, then moved aside entirely. A man's voice, rough with exertion and something that might have been pain, called down, "I'm coming in. Don't scream. Don't scream," as if that was a reasonable request to make to a stranger trapped in a broken elevator at nearly 10 o'clock at night. I opened my mouth to do exactly that when a pair of expensive Italian leather shoes appeared through the opening, followed by long legs and suit pants that looked like they cost more than my monthly rent. He dropped into the elevator with the fluid grace of someone accustomed to unconventional entrances, landing in a crouch that immediately revealed why he'd asked me not to scream. His white dress shirt was torn and stained with what looked unmistakably like blood. Not splattered like a victim, but soaked through in places like someone who'd been in close contact with violence. "Jesus," I breathed, pressing harder against the wall. "Are you hurt? Should I call?" "No." His voice cut through my question with quiet authority. He straightened to his full height, and I realized I'd made a mistake in thinking the elevator was spacious. He filled the small space completely, all broad shoulders and contained power. His dark hair was disheveled, with threads of silver at the temples that suggested he was older than his face indicated. But it was his eyes that made my breath catch, dark, intelligent, and completely calm, despite the blood on his shirt and the circumstances of his dramatic entrance. "My name is Vincent," he said, as if we'd been introduced at a cocktail party rather than in a broken elevator while he bled through expensive fabric. "I apologize for the unconventional meeting. I was in the parking garage when some business associates decided our negotiations required a more physical approach." Business associates. Right. Because legitimate business associates regularly conducted negotiations that ended with people bleeding in elevator shafts. I wanted to point out the obvious flaws in his story, but something about his steady gaze suggested that questions might not be welcome. "Emma," I managed, my voice smaller than I'd intended. "Emma Hartley. I work for Whitmore and Associates." Something shifted in his expression at the mention of the firm, a flicker of interest that might have been surprise or might have been something else entirely. "The law firm, on 42. It wasn't a question, which meant he already knew where I worked, which meant this meeting might not be as coincidental as it appeared. I tightened my grip on my briefcase, the weight of the Albanian Import Corporation contracts suddenly feeling significant in a way I couldn't quite articulate. "How did you know the elevator was stuck?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "How did you know I was in here?" Before he could answer, a sound echoed through the building that made my blood run cold. Footsteps in the stairwell, multiple sets, moving with the kind of coordinated precision that suggested military training or something worse. And voices, speaking in a language that sounded harsh and unfamiliar, but with an undertone of urgency that needed no translation. Vincent's expression hardened instantly, his earlier calm replaced by something predatory and alert. He moved to the elevator doors, pressing his ear against them for a moment before stepping back with a grimace. "Albanian," he said quietly, more to himself than to me. Then louder, "Emma, I need you to listen to me very carefully. The men in this building tonight aren't here for a business meeting. They're here to kill me. And if they find you with me, they'll kill you too." The casual way he delivered this information, as if he were discussing the weather rather than potential murder, made my knees weak. I slid down the wall until I was sitting on the elevator floor, my briefcase in my lap, trying to process the fact that my boring Tuesday night had apparently become a life-or-death situation. "I don't understand," I whispered. Why would anyone want to kill you? Who are you? Another sound from the stairwell, closer now. Footsteps on the 38th floor, maybe the 37th. Vincent crouched beside me, his presence both comforting and terrifying in its intensity. Right now, I'm the man who's going to keep you alive, he said, his voice low and urgent. But I need you to trust me, and I need you to do exactly what I say. Can you do that? I stared into his dark eyes, searching for some indication that this was all an elaborate joke, or a mistake, or anything other than what it appeared to be. But there was no deception there, only grim certainty, and something that might have been genuine concern for my welfare. The contracts, I said suddenly, pieces of a puzzle I didn't want to solve clicking into place. The Albanian Import Corporation. You know about them, don't you? His expression confirmed my suspicion before he spoke. More than you want to know. And unfortunately, more than they want you to know. The footsteps stopped directly outside the elevator doors. I could hear voices now, speaking in rapid Albanian, and the distinctive sound of weapons being checked and readied. Vincent was already moving, removing his torn shirt to reveal a physique that spoke of violence and discipline in equal measure. Across his chest and arms, I could see scars that told stories I wasn't sure I wanted to hear. Emma? He said, pulling a gun from somewhere I hadn't seen him reach. I'm about to ask you to do something that's going to seem impossible. But if you want to see tomorrow, you're going to have to trust that I know what I'm doing. I clutched my briefcase tighter, the contracts inside suddenly feeling like evidence of a crime I'd unknowingly been part of. What are you asking me to do? Before he could answer, the sounds outside the elevator changed. Metal clanging, followed by the high-pitched whine of power tools. They were cutting through the doors. Vincent looked up at the access panel he'd entered through, then back at me with an expression that was part apology, part determination. I'm asking you to climb. Part 2. The chase. The access panel above us looked impossibly small, like a portal to another dimension where physics might not apply, and gravity was merely a suggestion. I stared at it while the sound of metal being slowly carved apart continued outside the elevator doors, each shriek of the cutting tools making my nerves stretch tighter. I can't, I said, my voice barely audible over the industrial noise. I'm afraid of heights. I can barely handle being on the 42nd floor with the windows, and you want me to climb through an elevator shaft? Vincent checked his weapon with movements so practiced they seemed unconscious, then looked at me with an expression that managed to be both patient and urgent. Emma, in about 3 minutes, those doors are going to open. When they do, the men on the other side are going to start shooting first and asking questions later. You can be afraid of heights, or you can be dead. But you can't be both. The brutal honesty of his statement cut through my panic like cold water. I'd spent 6 months at Whitmore and Associates learning to navigate corporate politics and legal technicalities. But nothing in law school had prepared me for life or death decisions measured in minutes rather than billable hours. How do you know they'll shoot? I asked, even as I stood and approached the opening above us. Maybe they just want to talk. Because I know who sent them, Vincent replied, holstering his gun and interlacing his fingers to create a makeshift step. And because I've seen what the Albanian crew does to people who get in their way. Trust me when I say that conversation is not their preferred conflict resolution method. I placed my hands on his shoulders, feeling the solid warmth of muscle and bone beneath my palms. This close, I could smell his cologne. Something expensive and subtle that somehow survived elevator shafts and violence. It struck me as oddly civilized, a reminder that despite the blood and guns and midnight elevator escapes, he was still a man who paid attention to details. On 3, he said. 1, 2. He lifted me before reaching 3, probably because he knew I would have hesitated. My fingers found the edge of the access panel, and I hauled myself up into the elevator shaft with strength I didn't know I possessed. The space was larger than I'd expected, but far more terrifying. A vertical tunnel that stretched both up and down into darkness, punctuated only by the occasional emergency light. Vincent followed me with an agility that suggested this wasn't his first unconventional exit from a building. As soon as he was beside me in the shaft, the sound from below changed. The cutting had stopped, replaced by voices speaking rapidly in Albanian, and the distinctive click of multiple weapons being readied. "Service ladder," Vincent whispered, pointing to a metal ladder bolted to the shaft wall. "We go up. The men downstairs will expect us to try to escape at ground level. They'll have people covering the lobby and parking garage." "Up?" I repeated, looking at the ladder that disappeared into darkness above us. "How far up?" 45th floor. There's a maintenance access that leads to the roof." 45th floor. That meant climbing past my own office, past everything familiar, into parts of the building I'd never seen. I grabbed the first rung of the ladder, my hands already shaking from adrenaline and exertion. Below us, the elevator doors finally gave way with a grinding crash of metal. Shouts erupted from the elevator car, angry voices discovering our absence. I climbed faster, each rung taking me further from the world I understood, and deeper into whatever nightmare Vincent had inadvertently pulled me into. "They'll check the shaft," I whispered as we climbed. "Eventually," Vincent agreed from below me. "But they'll be cautious. They don't know if I'm armed or how many people are with me." The implication was clear. He was armed, and apparently quite effectively so, given how calmly he discussed potential armed confrontation. I tried not to think about who he might be, or what he might have done to warrant assassination attempts by Albanian business associates. We climbed in silence for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Each floor we passed had a small window into the hallway beyond, and I caught glimpses of my familiar workplace transformed into something sinister. Security guards with weapons drawn moved through corridors I walked every day, their faces grim with professional focus. "Your building has interesting security protocols," I observed quietly when we paused at the 44th floor landing. Vincent's laugh was humorless. "Not my building. But you're right. The security here is more comprehensive than most law firms require." More pieces of the puzzle I didn't want to solve clicked into place. The Albanian Import Corporation wasn't just a client. They were something more. Something that required armed guards and emergency protocols and late-night meetings that ended in violence. "The contracts in my briefcase," I said as we resumed climbing. "They're not just import documents, are they?" "No," Vincent replied simply. "They're not." We reached the 45th floor, and Vincent produced a key from somewhere in his pocket that opened the maintenance access door. The hallway beyond was different from the floors below. Utilitarian concrete instead of corporate carpet. Harsh fluorescent lighting instead of warm ambient glow. This was the building's industrial floor, where the real work of keeping 44 floors of Manhattan legal practice operational happened. "This way," Vincent said, leading me through a maze of pipes and electrical conduits toward what I assumed was the roof access. "Emma, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. How much do you know about your firm's client relationships?" The question felt loaded with implications I wasn't sure I wanted to understand. "I know we handle corporate law, mergers and acquisitions, international trade agreements, high-end clients who pay premium fees for specialized services. Have you ever wondered why Albanian Import Corporation pays your firm $5 million annually for what appears to be standard import documentation? $5 million. I'd seen the fee structure in the files, but somehow the number had never quite registered. $5 million for importing art and specialty foods seemed excessive, even by Manhattan legal standards. I assumed they required specialized expertise, I said weakly. "They do," Vincent agreed. "Just not the legal kind. We reached a heavy steel door marked Roof Access, Authorized Personnel Only. Vincent's key worked here too, which raised questions about his relationship with the building that I decided not to ask. The Manhattan night hit us like a physical force. Wind and rain and the distant sound of traffic far below. The roof was a maze of HVAC equipment and communication arrays, with the city spreading out around us in all directions like a glittering circuit board. "Beautiful view," Vincent said, seemingly unaffected by the height that made me grab the nearest air conditioning unit for support. "Different perspective up here. You can see how everything connects." I followed his gaze and realized he wasn't talking about the scenery. From 45 stories up, the city's layout revealed patterns invisible from street level. The building we stood on was positioned at the intersection of several major routes, with clear sight lines to the financial district, the courts, and the harbor. It was the perfect location for someone who needed to monitor multiple interests simultaneously. "Who are you?" I asked again, louder this time to be heard over the wind. Before he could answer, the roof access door exploded open behind us. 3 men in dark suits emerged, weapons drawn, shouting in Albanian. Vincent moved faster than I'd thought possible, pulling me behind a large ventilation unit as bullets sparked off the metal around us. "Stay down," he ordered, drawing his own weapon. "No matter what happens, stay behind cover." What happened next was unlike anything I'd ever seen outside of movies. Vincent moved with deadly precision, using the rooftop infrastructure as cover while systematically eliminating the threat posed by our pursuers. It lasted perhaps 60 seconds, but those 60 seconds revealed more about his true nature than hours of conversation could have. When the shooting stopped, 3 Albanian gunmen lay motionless on the roof, and Vincent stood calmly reloading his weapon as if he'd just finished a routine business transaction. "Are they dead?" I whispered, unable to look directly at the bodies. "Yes," he replied matter-of-factly. "They came here to kill us both. I don't leave loose ends." The casual way he discussed murder made my stomach lurch. "What about the police? Someone must have heard the gunshots." Vincent smiled, and for the first time since dropping into my elevator, it seemed genuinely amused. "Emma, this building processes more gray area legal work than any other structure in Manhattan. The police have learned not to investigate every unusual sound that comes from here." He helped me to my feet, his touch gentle despite the violence he'd just committed. "We need to move. The men who came after us were just the advance team. There will be others." "I don't understand any of this," I said, my voice breaking with exhaustion and fear. 6 hours ago, I was reviewing contracts for a legitimate import business. Now I'm on a roof with a man who just killed 3 people, and apparently my law firm is involved in something that requires armed security and assassination attempts. Vincent studied my face in the ambient light from the city below. "Emma, your law firm handles the legal framework for the largest money laundering operation on the East Coast. Albanian Import Corporation doesn't import luxury goods. They import people, drugs, and weapons, then use your carefully crafted legal structures to make the money from those transactions appear legitimate." The words hit me like physical blows. Every contract I'd reviewed, every document I'd prepared, every late night I'd spent ensuring the legal framework was airtight, all of it in service of something monstrous. "I didn't know," I whispered. "I swear I didn't know." "I believe you," Vincent said, and something in his voice suggested he was telling the truth. "The question is, what are you going to do now that you do know?" Before I could answer, my phone buzzed with a text message, the first signal I'd received since the elevator broke down. I pulled it out with shaking hands and read the message that made my blood run cold. "Emma, this is Marcus. Albanian associates have expressed concerns about document security. Suggest you take immediate vacation. We'll handle your cases personally. Leave the city tonight. Do not contact anyone from the firm." I showed the message to Vincent, watching his expression darken as he read it. "Your colleague is trying to save your life," he observed, "which means someone at your firm knows exactly what the Albanian corporation really does, and they know you've discovered too much." "Too much about what?" I demanded. "I still don't understand what any of this has to do with you, or why people are trying to kill you, or how you know so much about my clients." Vincent was quiet for a long moment, looking out over the city as if calculating odds and possibilities. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of confession. "Because the Albanian corporation isn't just laundering money through your firm, Emma. They're trying to take over territory that belongs to my family. And my family has been in the business of protecting this city from people like them for longer than you've been alive." Part 3. The Revelation. The wind on the roof seemed to intensify as Vincent's words sank in, carrying with it the sounds of sirens from somewhere far below. I stared at him. This man who had dropped into my elevator like something out of a thriller novel, trying to reconcile his confession with everything I thought I knew about the world. "Your family," I repeated slowly. "What kind of business is your family in exactly?" His smile was rueful, tinged with something that might have been regret. "The kind that doesn't appear on any corporate filing or tax return. The kind that solves problems the legal system can't or won't address." Even in my state of shock and adrenaline-fueled confusion, the euphemisms were clear. I was standing on a rooftop with a member of organized crime, surrounded by the bodies of men he'd killed with the same casual efficiency most people reserved for answering email. "You're Mafia," I said. It wasn't a question. "That's a reductive term," Vincent replied, "but not inaccurate. My family has interests throughout the city, legitimate businesses, community protection, dispute resolution services that operate outside traditional legal channels. Community protection, dispute resolution, the carefully chosen language of a man accustomed to describing violence in corporate terms. I thought about the scars I'd glimpsed on his chest, the practiced way he'd handled his weapon, the calm demeanor he'd maintained while men hunted us through a building. And the Albanians? Are trying to expand into territories that my family has protected for 3 generations. His expression hardened. They specialize in human trafficking, primarily young women from Eastern Europe. They've been using your law firm to create the legal infrastructure necessary to legitimize their operation. The weight of his words pressed down on me like a physical force. Every contract I'd drafted, every corporate structure I'd helped establish, had been in service of something unspeakably evil. The careful legal frameworks I'd been so proud of creating were facilitating the enslavement of women who might not be much older than I was. "I'm going to be sick," I said, sinking down onto the rooftop beside the ventilation unit. Vincent crouched beside me, his presence surprisingly comforting despite everything I'd just learned. "Emma, you couldn't have known. The structures they had you create are standard corporate law. Without inside knowledge of their actual business model, there was no way to identify the real purpose." "But you knew," I said, looking up at him. "How long have you known?" 6 months, since they first approached your firm." Vincent's voice carried a weight of grim satisfaction. "We've been monitoring their expansion attempts for over a year. When they retained Whitmore and Associates, we knew they were serious about establishing permanent operations in Manhattan. 6 months, the exact length of time I'd been working at the firm. The timing felt like more than coincidence, especially given Vincent's apparent knowledge of the building's security protocols and his convenient access to restricted areas. "You've been watching me," I realized. "Haven't you?" Vincent was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice carried something that might have been regret. "Not you specifically. The firm. Anyone handling Albanian corporation files. We needed to understand the scope of their legal preparation. And now, everything has changed." He stood, extending his hand to help me up. "The Albanians know you've seen too much. Your colleague's warning confirms that someone at your firm is working directly with them, Probably has been from the beginning. They'll eliminate anyone who poses a security risk. I took his hand, letting him pull me to my feet. His grip was warm and steady, an anchor in a situation that seemed to shift and change every few minutes. What does that mean for me? It means you have two choices, Vincent said, his expression serious. You can disappear. Leave the city tonight. Change your identity. Start over somewhere far from here. My family has resources that could facilitate that kind of relocation. The offer was tempting in its simplicity. Walk away from everything. The job that had turned out to be a front for human trafficking. The apartment in a city that suddenly felt dangerous. The life I'd built that was apparently constructed on foundations of blood and money. Or you help me destroy them. The proposition hung in the air between us like a challenge. Help a crime boss destroy his rivals. 6 months ago, the idea would have been unthinkable. But 6 months ago, I'd believed in the justice system, in corporate law, in the possibility that hard work and good intentions were enough to make a difference in the world. Why would you want my help? I asked. I'm a corporate lawyer who apparently couldn't recognize a criminal enterprise when I was literally writing their incorporation papers. What could I possibly offer someone like you? Vincent's smile was sharp, predatory. You understand their legal structure better than anyone except the people who designed it. You know how they've organized their money flows, their corporate hierarchies, their operational frameworks. That information is incredibly valuable and incredibly illegal for me to share. Attorney-client privilege, Vincent nodded. Under normal circumstances, you'd be ethically bound to protect their confidentiality. But these aren't normal circumstances, Emma. They're using your legal work to facilitate slavery. Every day you protect their secrets. More women disappear into a system designed to destroy them. The moral calculus was brutal in its clarity. Violate my professional ethics or become complicit in human trafficking. It wasn't really a choice at all. My phone buzzed again. Another text, this time from an unknown number. Ms. Hartley, please contact us immediately regarding urgent security matters. Your cooperation is essential. K. Petrov, Albanian Import Corporation. I showed the message to Vincent, watching his expression turn deadly. Petrov, he said, the name carrying a weight of personal hatred. Kristak Petrov, the Albanian's head of security. If he's contacting you directly, it means they're moving to containment mode. What's containment mode? Elimination of potential witnesses. Vincent's voice was matter-of-fact, as if he were discussing shipping schedules rather than murder. They'll want to meet with you, probably somewhere public to make you feel safe. Then you'll disappear. Another text arrived before I could respond. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., Bryant Park Cafe. Come alone. We simply need to clarify some documentation questions. This is routine follow-up. The casual tone of the message was somehow more terrifying than an explicit threat would have been. The careful politeness, the professional language, the suggestion that this was a normal business meeting. All of it designed to make me feel like I was overreacting, like my fear was irrational. Routine follow-up, I read aloud. Right. They're good at this, Vincent acknowledged. The organization has been operating in Europe for 20 years before expanding to North America. They've refined their approaches to maximum efficiency. The wind on the roof was getting stronger, whipping my hair around my face and making my eyes water. Or maybe the tears were from something else entirely. The realization that everything I'd worked for had been contaminated, that my carefully planned career had been hijacked by monsters. If I help you, I said slowly, what exactly would that involve? Vincent moved closer, close enough that I could see the gold flecks in his dark eyes, close enough to smell his cologne even over the Manhattan wind. We need to document their entire operation. Financial flows, organizational structure, key personnel, operational locations. Information that would allow law enforcement to dismantle the trafficking network entirely. Law enforcement? I couldn't hide my surprise. I thought you said your family operated outside legal channels. We do. But human trafficking is a business we don't tolerate in our territory, regardless of who's running it. Sometimes our interests align with law enforcement. Sometimes we eliminate problems quietly. In this case, the scale of their operation requires federal intervention. The distinction seemed important to him, this line between the kind of crime his family engaged in and the kind the Albanians represented. I filed it away as potentially significant information, though I wasn't sure why it mattered to my decision. And if I say no? If I take your first offer and disappear? Vincent's expression softened slightly. Then tomorrow you get on a plane to a city where Christok Petrov can't reach you, and you start over with a new name and enough money to build whatever life you want. It was a generous offer. More generous than I had any right to expect from someone I'd met 2 hours ago in the middle of a life-or-death situation. But something about the way he presented it made me think he was hoping I'd choose differently. What would you prefer I do? I'd prefer you help me burn their entire operation to the ground, Vincent said without hesitation. But not because it serves my family's interests. Because you're the kind of person who became a lawyer to fight injustice, even if you ended up working for a firm that profits from it. And because every woman they traffic deserves someone willing to take risks to free them. The appeal to my better angels was effective precisely because it felt genuine. This wasn't manipulation. At least not entirely. Vincent wanted my help, but he also seemed to understand what kind of person I was underneath the corporate lawyer facade. How would it work? I asked. Practically speaking, I mean. I can't exactly show up to the office tomorrow and start copying confidential files. You won't need to go to the office, Vincent replied. Your colleague's warning was well-intentioned but incomplete. The Albanians have been monitoring your communications for weeks. They know you accessed files outside normal parameters. They know you've been asking questions about their business structure. How do you know what they know? Vincent's smile was sharp, because we've been monitoring their communications too. The difference is, we're better at it. A new sound drifted up from the streets below. Helicopters, multiple aircraft converging on our building from different directions. Vincent tensed, his hand moving instinctively toward his weapon. Police? I asked. Unlikely. The Albanians have people in several law enforcement agencies. Vincent moved to the edge of the roof, peering over the side. Private security. They're escalating faster than I expected. What does that mean? It means they're more concerned about what you know than we anticipated, which suggests their operation is larger and more vulnerable than our intelligence indicated. Vincent turned back to me, his expression urgent. Emma, I need your answer now. Help me or run, but decide quickly. I thought about the women Vincent had described, trapped in a system designed to erase their humanity. I thought about the contracts I'd drafted, the legal frameworks I'd built that made their suffering possible. I thought about the choice between professional ethics and basic human decency. I'll help, I said. Tell me what you need me to do. Vincent's smile was fierce with approval. First, we need to get off this roof alive. The helicopters are carrying thermal imaging equipment. They'll find us within minutes. And then? Then we disappear into the city, and you show me everything you know about how the Albanian Import Corporation really operates. As if summoned by his words, searchlights blazed to life around the building's perimeter, powerful beams sweeping across the rooftop in systematic patterns. Vincent grabbed my hand, pulling me toward a maintenance shed I hadn't noticed before. This way, he said. And Emma, once we do this, there's no going back. You understand that, right? I squeezed his hand, feeling the calluses that spoke of violence and the warmth that suggested humanity. I understand. As we slipped into the maintenance shed and down a service ladder that led into the building's mechanical systems, I realized I was crossing a line I'd never even imagined existed. 6 hours ago, I'd been a corporate lawyer with student loans and a studio apartment and dreams of making partner. Now I was a fugitive collaborating with organized crime to bring down human traffickers. The transformation should have terrified me. Instead, for the first time in months, I felt like I was finally doing something that mattered. Part 4. The Alliance. The service tunnels beneath the building were a hidden world of pipes, cables, and mechanical systems that stretched through the Manhattan bedrock like arteries through a body. Vincent moved through them with the confidence of someone who'd spent considerable time learning their layout, while I struggled to keep up in heels that had been designed for conference rooms rather than underground escape routes. These tunnels connect to the subway system 2 blocks north, Vincent explained as we navigated around a massive electrical transformer. Old infrastructure from when the building was constructed in the 1960s. Most people don't even know they exist. But you do, I observed, breathing hard from the exertion of trying to match his pace. My family has interests throughout the city. We make it our business to understand how things really work, not just how they appear to work. He paused at a junction where multiple tunnels converged, consulting what looked like a hand-drawn map. Right here. We turned into a smaller tunnel that sloped upward toward what I hoped was street level. The air was warmer here, thick with the smell of rain and car exhaust filtering down from above. I could hear the distant rumble of traffic, the sound of normal life continuing while my world underwent fundamental reorganization. "Vincent," I said as we climbed, "when you said your family has been protecting the city for 3 generations, what exactly did you mean?" He glanced back at me, and in the dim light from his phone's flashlight, I caught something that might have been pride mixed with resignation. "My grandfather came here from Sicily in 1952. The neighborhoods were different then, more insular, more dependent on community networks for protection and support. Law enforcement was either corrupt or indifferent to immigrant communities. So your family filled the gap. We provided services the system couldn't or wouldn't provide. Protection from predators, dispute resolution, loans for people who couldn't access traditional banking, enforcement of agreements that had no legal standing." Vincent stopped at what appeared to be a dead end, then pressed something I couldn't see that caused a section of wall to swing inward. The methods weren't always legal, but the intentions were generally good. We emerged into what looked like the basement of a small restaurant, all stainless steel surfaces and industrial cooking equipment. The space was empty, but felt recently used, with lingering aromas of garlic and basil that made my stomach growl, despite everything that had happened. "And now?" I asked, as Vincent led me up a narrow staircase toward ground level. "Now the city is different. Law enforcement is more professional, social services exist, legitimate banking is available to most people. But there are still gaps in the system, still predators who operate in those gaps." He paused at the top of the stairs, listening carefully before opening the door. "The Albanians represent the worst kind of predator. They exploit the same vulnerabilities my grandfather's generation tried to protect." We stepped into the main dining area of what was clearly an Italian restaurant, all red-checkered tablecloths and wine bottles used as candle holders. It was empty, except for an elderly man sitting at a corner table, reading a newspaper by lamplight. "No, Vincent called softly. "Sorry to disturb you." The old man looked up, and I saw where Vincent had inherited his sharp intelligence and contained power. Despite his age, his eyes were alert and assessing as they moved from Vincent to me and back again. "The girl from the law firm," he said in accented English. "She's prettier than in the surveillance photos." Surveillance photos, of course. I was beginning to understand that very little of what I'd experienced tonight had been coincidental. "Emma, this is my grandfather, Carlo Castellano," Vincent said. No, this is Emma Hartley. She's agreed to help us with the Albanian problem." Carlo studied me with the intensity of someone accustomed to making life-and-death decisions based on character assessment. "You understand what you're involving yourself in, Signorina?" This is not a game for lawyers and judges. I'm beginning to understand that the game I thought I was playing was never real to begin with, I replied. Your grandson has made it clear that my choice is between helping you or becoming a casualty of the Albanian corporation's expansion plans. The old man's smile was sharp with approval. Good. You think clearly under pressure. Vincent, show her what we know. Vincent led me to a back room that had been converted into something resembling a situation room. Maps of Manhattan covered one wall, marked with colored pins and notes in what looked like Italian. Another wall held photographs and documents connected by red string in patterns that suggested conspiracy theories, but looked disturbingly professional. This is what we've compiled over the past 6 months, Vincent said, gesturing to the photographs. Names, faces, operational locations, financial networks. The Albanian corporation is the legitimate front for an organization called the Petrov Group. I studied the photographs, recognizing some faces from business meetings at the firm. Kristak Petrov, the man who'd sent me the threatening text, was prominently featured. But there were others I didn't recognize, hard-faced men and women with the look of people accustomed to violence. How many people are involved? I asked. In New York, maybe 30 core personnel, but their network extends throughout the East Coast and back to Europe. This isn't a local operation, Emma. It's international organized crime on a scale that makes traditional mafia families look like neighborhood watch groups. One photograph in particular caught my attention. A man in an expensive suit shaking hands with someone I recognized. That's David Whitmore, I said, pointing to the image. My firm's managing partner. Taken 3 weeks ago at a private dinner in Little Italy, Vincent confirmed. Your boss has been working directly with the Albanians since they first approached the firm. The $5 million annual retainer isn't just for legal services. It's for access, protection, and silence. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. Whitmore had hired me personally, had mentored me through my first months at the firm, had praised my attention to detail and analytical thinking, all while knowing exactly what kind of work he was asking me to do. He knew, I whispered. From the beginning, he knew what they really were. More than knew. Participated. Vincent's voice carried cold anger. The law firm isn't just providing legal services. They're providing intelligence on law enforcement activities, advance warning of investigations, and legal strategies for avoiding prosecution. I sank into one of the chairs around the room's central table, feeling the weight of my naivety like a physical burden. I really didn't know. I swear to you, I thought I was just doing corporate law. I believe you, Vincent said, sitting across from me. Your pattern of file access shows curiosity about their business model, not complicity in it. If you'd been part of the conspiracy, you wouldn't have been asking the questions that attracted their attention. What questions? You tried to trace the actual import manifest for their shipments. You cross-referenced their declared business activities with their financial filings. You asked your colleague Marcus about the discrepancies you found. Vincent pulled out a tablet and showed me a list of my own computer activities. All of it perfectly reasonable due diligence. All of it threatening to an organization that depends on legal camouflage. Seeing my own actions laid out like evidence in a criminal case was disturbing on multiple levels. How long have you been monitoring my work? Since your second week at the firm. We identified you as the primary attorney handling their documentation. Vincent's expression was apologetic, but unyielding. I'm sorry for the invasion of privacy, but we needed to understand how much their lawyers knew about the real business. And now you know I was just the useful idiot. No, Vincent said firmly. Now I know you're someone with the intelligence to recognize wrongdoing and the conscience to be troubled by it. Those are rare qualities in corporate law. Carlo Castellano appeared in the doorway, carrying a tray with coffee and what looked like homemade cookies. Eat something, both of you. This conversation will be long. I accepted the coffee gratefully, realizing I hadn't eaten since lunch what felt like days ago. The normalcy of the gesture, sharing food with a crime family while planning to bring down human traffickers, struck me as perfectly surreal. "Emma," Carlo said, settling into a chair beside us. "Before we continue, you should understand something about my family's business. We are not saints. We engage in activities that the law considers criminal. But we have rules, boundaries that we do not cross." "What kind of boundaries?" "We do not harm innocent people. We do not traffic in human beings. We do not profit from the exploitation of the vulnerable." The old man's voice carried the weight of absolute conviction. "These Albanians violate every principle my family has operated under for 70 years. Vincent nodded, adding, "The women they traffic come from desperately poor regions of Eastern Europe. They're promised legitimate work in America, housekeeping, restaurant work, legitimate employment. Instead, they're enslaved." "Where?" I asked. "I mean physically. Where are they being held?" Vincent exchanged a glance with his grandfather before answering. "We've identified 3 locations in Manhattan and 2 in Brooklyn. Residential buildings, commercial properties, places where screaming wouldn't attract attention." The casual way he described it made my stomach turn. "Have you tried to help them? The women, I mean?" "We've extracted 12 so far," Carlo said, quietly without involving law enforcement. "But for every woman we free, 2 more arrive. We can't solve this problem through rescue operations alone, which is why we need the Albanian corporation's legal infrastructure dismantled completely," Vincent continued. "Without the corporate camouflage your firm provides, their operation becomes much more vulnerable to federal investigation." I set down my coffee cup, decision crystallizing in my mind. "What exactly do you need me to do?" Vincent pulled out a folder thick with documents. "We need you to help us understand their complete legal structure. Corporate hierarchies, financial flows, operational command structure. Information that would allow federal prosecutors to seize their assets and identify every person involved in the trafficking operation. That would require access to files I no longer have." "Actually, it wouldn't." Vincent's smile was sharp with satisfaction. "Because 20 minutes ago, your firm's computer systems were compromised by a very sophisticated cyber attack. Albanian corporation files, among others, were completely corrupted." I stared at him. "You hacked my firm." "We hired professionals to retrieve specific information related to ongoing criminal activity," Vincent corrected. "The data recovery will take weeks, during which time all Albanian corporation legal work will be suspended." "And during those weeks?" "You'll be working with us to analyze the information and prepare comprehensive documentation for the FBI." Vincent leaned forward, his expression intense. "Emma, we can end this. All of it. But we need someone who understands their legal structure from the inside." The offer was tempting beyond description. A chance to undo the damage I'd unknowingly helped create, to actually fight injustice instead of facilitating it. But the cost was everything I'd worked for. My career, my reputation, my entire professional life. "If I do this, I can never practice law again," I said. "No firm will hire someone who violated client confidentiality on this scale." Carlo Castellano's voice was gentle but firm. "Signorina, some things are more important than careers." Before I could respond, Vincent's phone buzzed with an urgent text. He read it quickly, his expression darkening. "What is it?" I asked. "The Albanians found the restaurant where you live. They're questioning your neighbors about your schedule, your habits, anyone who visits you." Vincent stood, already moving toward what I assumed was another escape route. "They're escalating faster than we anticipated." "My neighbors," I said, fear spiking through me. "Mrs. Chen upstairs, she's 80 years old. If they hurt her because of me, they won't, Vincent said with quiet confidence. Because we're going to give them something else to focus on. What? His smile was predatory. We're going to let Kristak Petrov know that the woman he's hunting is now under the protection of the Castellano family. And we're going to make it very clear what happens to people who threaten our interests. Part 5. The protection. The safe house Vincent brought me to was a penthouse apartment in a building that looked ordinary from the outside, but revealed layers of sophisticated security once we entered. Cameras that weren't immediately visible, doormen who carried themselves like soldiers, elevators that required special keycards to access certain floors. How long have you owned this place? I asked, as Vincent led me through a living room that managed to be both luxurious and somehow impersonal, like a very expensive hotel suite. 5 years. We maintain several properties throughout the city for situations that require discretion. He gestured toward a wall of windows that offered a panoramic view of Manhattan. This one has the advantage of being impossible to approach without being seen. I set my briefcase down on the granite kitchen counter, suddenly aware of how surreal the past 6 hours had been. This morning I'd been a corporate lawyer worried about billing requirements and partnership tracks. Now I was in hiding with a crime family, planning to bring down human traffickers using stolen legal documents. Vincent, I said, as he moved around the apartment with practiced efficiency, checking what looked like security monitors hidden in decorative panels. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. He paused, giving me his full attention. What do you want to know? Are you planning to kill Kristak Petrov and his people? Because if that's your solution to the Albanian problem, I can't be part of it. Vincent studied my face for a long moment, as if weighing how much truth I could handle. Emma, the men who came after us tonight weren't planning to arrest us or take us to court. They were planning to murder us both and dispose of our bodies in a way that would ensure we were never found. That doesn't answer my question. My preference is to provide the FBI with enough evidence to dismantle their entire operation through legal channels, Vincent replied carefully. But if federal prosecution fails, or if they continue to threaten innocent people, then yes, I will eliminate them. The clinical way he discussed potential murder was chilling, but I found myself oddly comforted by his honesty. And you're telling me this because? Because you deserve to know exactly what kind of man you've agreed to work with, and because I won't lie to you about the realities of this situation. Vincent moved closer, his expression serious. The Albanians don't recognize legal boundaries, Emma. They operate under the assumption that violence is the ultimate problem-solving tool. Sometimes the only way to stop that kind of predator is to become more dangerous than they are. My phone rang before I could respond. Unknown number, which probably meant it was them. Don't answer, Vincent said immediately. What if it's my family, my friends? What if they've... Answer it, he said, changing his mind. But put it on speaker and let me listen. I accepted the call, my hand trembling slightly as I pressed the speaker button. Ms. Hartley. The voice was calm, professional, with the slight accent I'd heard in the stairwell. Kristak Petrov. I trust you received our message about tomorrow's meeting. I did, I managed, trying to keep my voice steady. Excellent. I wanted to personally assure you that this is simply routine follow-up regarding some documentation questions. There's no cause for concern. The reasonable tone, the careful phrasing, the deliberate emphasis on routine business, all of it designed to make me feel like I was overreacting to a normal client call. I appreciate you reaching out, I said, sticking to neutral corporate speak. However, I'm currently dealing with a family emergency out of state. I won't be available for meetings this week. Silence on the other end. Then, I'm sorry to hear about your family situation, Ms. Hartley. Is there anything our organization can do to assist? We have resources that might help resolve emergency situations quickly. The offer of help sounded like a threat wrapped in silk. Vincent was watching me intently, and I could see approval in his eyes for how I was handling the call. "That's very kind, but I have everything under control," I replied. "I'll contact your office next week to reschedule." "Actually, Ms. Hartley, I'm afraid this matter is quite urgent. Time-sensitive, you might say. Perhaps we could arrange a brief phone consultation while you're away." "I'm sorry, but I'm not able to discuss client matters while traveling. You understand? Confidentiality protocols and secure communications." I was proud of how professional I sounded, despite the fear clawing at my throat. Another pause. When Petrov spoke again, his tone had shifted subtly, the veneer of politeness thinning. "Ms. Hartley, I hope you understand that Albanian Import Corporation places great value on attorney cooperation. We've invested considerable resources in our relationship with Whitmore and Associates." "Of course, and I take my professional obligations very seriously." "I'm certain you do, which is why I'm confident we'll speak very soon. Perhaps sooner than you expect." The line went dead. Vincent was already moving, pulling out his own phone and dialing rapidly. "They're not buying the family emergency story," he said as the call connected. "Marco, activate full protection protocols for the Hartley package. Assume hostile surveillance on all known locations. Yes, including the building. No, bring her sister here directly. Don't risk exposure." "My sister?" I interrupted. "Rachel, what does she have to do with any of this?" Vincent finished his call before answering. "Emma, the Albanians don't just threaten targets directly. They apply pressure through family members, friends, anyone who might influence your decision-making. Rachel lives in Boston. She's a graduate student. She has nothing to do with my work or any of this, which makes her an ideal pressure point." Vincent's expression was grim. "They've already identified her through social media, employment records, any digital trail that connects her to you. The threat to your neighbors was just the beginning." I sank onto the couch, overwhelmed by the scope of the danger I'd inadvertently brought into the lives of people I cared about. "How do you know all this?" "Because it's standard operating procedure for this kind of organization. Identify vulnerabilities, apply pressure systematically until the target complies." Vincent sat beside me, his presence both comforting and somehow magnetic. "Emma, my people are already moving to protect everyone connected to you. Your sister will be brought here safely. Your neighbors are being relocated temporarily. No one will be hurt because of your association with me. And the cost of all this protection?" "There is no cost," Vincent said simply. "This is what we do for family." "I'm not family. I'm someone you met 6 hours ago." Vincent's smile was warm, transforming his face from coldly handsome to something more human. "You became family the moment you chose to help us fight them instead of running away." The casual way he extended belonging, the matter-of-fact inclusion in something I was only beginning to understand, should have been presumptuous. Instead, it felt like coming home after a long journey I hadn't realized I was taking. "Vincent," I said, studying his face in the ambient light from the city beyond the windows. "What happens after we stop the Albanians? What happens to me then?" "What do you want to happen?" It was a simple question with enormously complicated implications. What did I want? 6 months ago, I'd wanted partnership track at a prestigious firm, professional recognition, financial security. Now those goals felt hollow, tainted by the knowledge of what I'd unknowingly been participating in. "I want to practice law the way I thought I was practicing it," I said finally, fighting for justice instead of facilitating injustice, protecting people instead of enabling their exploitation. "That can be arranged." "How?" Vincent leaned back against the couch cushions, looking more relaxed than I'd seen him all evening. "My family's legitimate businesses require legal counsel, not the kind of corporate law you've been doing, but actual advocacy. Labor disputes, tenant rights, immigration cases for people who need help navigating the system." The offer was tempting in ways I hadn't expected. Real legal work. Cases that mattered. Clients who needed protection, rather than clients who preyed on others. And the other side of your business? The part that operates outside legal channels? Would remain completely separate from anything you're involved in, Vincent said firmly. Emma, I'm not asking you to become a mob lawyer. I'm asking you to be exactly the kind of lawyer you wanted to be when you first went to law school. Before I could respond, the apartment's elevator chimed softly. Vincent immediately tensed, his hand moving instinctively toward his weapon, but he relaxed when the elevator opened to reveal a young woman with my face and my stubbornly curly hair. Rachel, I breathed, standing up quickly. My sister stepped into the apartment, her eyes wide as she took in the luxury around her and the man sitting beside me. Emma, what the hell is going on? These people showed up at my apartment and said you were in danger, and I needed to come with them immediately. Are you hurt? I asked, rushing to hug her. Did anyone threaten you? No, nothing like that. They were actually very polite. But they wouldn't explain anything except that you were involved in some kind of legal case that had gotten dangerous. Rachel pulled back to study my face. Emma, you look terrible. When's the last time you slept? Vincent stood, extending his hand with formal courtesy. Ms. Hartley, I'm Vincent Castellano. I apologize for the dramatic circumstances, but your sister has uncovered information about a criminal organization that poses a threat to both of you. Rachel shook his hand automatically, but her eyes remained sharp with suspicion. What kind of criminal organization? The kind that traffics women from Eastern Europe into sexual slavery, I said bluntly. And I've been unknowingly helping them create the legal framework for their operation. My sister's face went pale. Jesus, Emma. It gets worse, I continued. They figured out that I know too much, and they're planning to eliminate me as a security risk. Vincent's family is providing protection while we work with federal authorities to shut down their operation. Rachel looked between Vincent and me, clearly trying to process information that sounded like something out of a movie. Vincent's family? Is in the business of protecting neighborhoods from exactly this kind of predator, Vincent said smoothly. We've been monitoring the Albanian organization for months. It was a careful way of describing organized crime, but Rachel was smart enough to read between the lines. So you're criminals protecting my sister from other criminals. That's a reductive way to put it, but not entirely inaccurate, Vincent replied with a slight smile. And Emma's involved how? I'm helping them analyze the legal structures I helped create, I said, so the FBI can dismantle the trafficking operation completely. Rachel sank into one of the apartment's elegant chairs, looking overwhelmed. This is insane. 3 days ago you were complaining about billing hours, and now you're working with the Mafia to fight human traffickers? I know how it sounds, I said, but Rachel, these people are enslaving women our age. I helped make it possible without realizing what I was doing. Now I have a chance to undo that damage. And if you get killed in the process? She won't, Vincent said with quiet confidence. My family doesn't lose people we've agreed to protect. Rachel studied him with the same analytical intelligence that had gotten her into MIT's doctoral program. You care about her. This isn't just business for you. Vincent's smile was soft, genuine. No, it's not just business. The admission hung in the air between us, changing the dynamic of everything that had happened. This wasn't just about criminal organizations and legal structures and federal investigations. Somewhere in the chaos of the evening, something personal had developed between us. Emma, Rachel said carefully, you barely know this man. I know enough, I replied, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. I know he's willing to risk his life to stop people who hurt the innocent. I know he's protected me and you and my neighbors without asking for anything in return. I know he's offered me a chance to practice law the way I always wanted to. And I looked at Vincent, seeing past the dangerous reputation and the criminal associations to something deeper. And I know I trust him. Vincent's expression grew serious. Emma, you should understand something before this goes any further. My life is complicated in ways that will never entirely go away. Being associated with me, caring about me, means accepting a level of risk and scrutiny that most people can't handle. Are you trying to warn me off? I'm trying to be honest about what you'd be choosing. I thought about the evening's events, the way he'd protected me, the careful balance he maintained between violence and gentleness, the way his presence made me feel both safe and dangerously alive. I chose hours ago, I said, when I decided to help you instead of running away. Rachel's expression softened. Well, if you're determined to date a mobster, at least pick one who owns a place like this. Despite everything, I laughed. Thanks for your support. Always, she said. But Emma, if he breaks your heart, I don't care how dangerous his family is. I'll hunt him down myself. Vincent's laugh was warm, genuine. I'd expect nothing less. Part 6, The Reckoning. 3 days later, I sat in a federal building in Lower Manhattan, surrounded by FBI agents, assistant U.S. attorneys, and enough evidence to dismantle the Albanian trafficking operation completely. The conference room table was covered with documents I'd helped analyze. Corporate structures, financial flows, operational hierarchies, all of it laid out like a roadmap to justice. Ms. Hartley, Agent Sarah Mitchell said, reviewing the summary I'd prepared. This is some of the most comprehensive intelligence we've ever received about an international trafficking organization. With this information, we can coordinate simultaneous raids in 6 cities. Vincent sat beside me, somehow managing to look perfectly respectable in a tailored navy suit, despite being there as a representative of organized crime. The FBI had been surprisingly willing to work with him once they understood the scope of the intelligence his family had gathered. The timing needs to be precise, Vincent said, pointing to a map marked with red pins. The Albanians move their operations every 10 days. If you hit some locations but miss others, they'll disappear entirely. Understood, Agent Mitchell replied. We've coordinated with Homeland Security, ICE, and international partners. This will be the largest anti-trafficking operation in U.S. history. I felt a strange mixture of pride and nausea. Pride at finally doing something that mattered. Nausea at the scale of suffering we were working to end. Over the past 3 days, Vincent had shown me photographs of women his family had rescued. Young faces hollow with trauma. Eyes that had seen horrors I couldn't imagine. What about the women currently being held? I asked. How quickly can they receive help? We have social workers and counselors standing by, Agent Mitchell assured me. Medical teams, trauma specialists, immigration attorneys. No one will be treated as a criminal. Rachel, who had insisted on attending despite the danger, squeezed my hand under the table. How many women are we talking about? Our best estimate is between 60 and 80 in the New York area alone, Vincent replied grimly. Worldwide, the Petrov Group has trafficked over 3,000 women in the past 5 years. The numbers were staggering, incomprehensible in their cruelty. I thought about the contracts I'd drafted, the corporate structures I'd built, all of it enabling this industrial-scale suffering. Ms. Hartley, one of the assistant U.S. attorneys, said, "We want to be clear about your legal situation. Your cooperation in this investigation, combined with the evidence that you were unaware of the criminal nature of your work, means you won't face prosecution. But we'll need your testimony if any of this goes to trial." "Of course," I replied. "Whatever you need." Vincent's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his expression tightening. "We have a problem." "What kind of problem?" Agent Mitchell asked. "Kristek Petrov isn't waiting for tomorrow's scheduled meeting with Emma. He's moving tonight." Vincent showed his phone to the agent. My people intercepted communications indicating an immediate assault on all Albanian operations. They're liquidating evidence. Including witnesses, I realized with growing horror. "We need to move now," Agent Mitchell said, already reaching for her radio. "All teams, Initiate Operation Clean Sweep immediately. Repeat, we are go for immediate execution. The room erupted into organized chaos as federal agents coordinated with tactical teams throughout the city. Vincent stood, checking his own weapon with movements that seemed unconscious. "Where are you going?" I asked, to make sure Petrov doesn't escape in the confusion. "This ends tonight, Emma. All of it." Something in his tone sent a chill through me. "Vincent, you promised me you'd let the FBI handle this." "I promised I'd try legal channels first," he corrected. "But if Petrov gets away, he'll rebuild somewhere else. More women will disappear." Agent Mitchell overheard our conversation. "Mr. Castellano, I understand your concerns, but this is a federal operation now. We need you to stay clear of the tactical sites." Vincent's smile was cold, predatory. "Agent Mitchell, with all due respect, there are aspects of this situation that require approaches your organization isn't equipped for." "Such as?" "Petrov has people inside law enforcement agencies. Someone leaked the details of tomorrow's planned meeting. Someone will leak tonight's operation." Vincent's voice carried absolute certainty. "He'll be gone before your teams reach him." "How can you be sure?" "Because 20 minutes ago, 3 different sources confirmed that Petrov received advance warning about federal surveillance. He's currently in a vehicle heading toward a private airfield in New Jersey." The implications hit everyone in the room simultaneously. Despite all the security protocols, all the careful planning, the operation had been compromised. "We need to intercept him before he reaches the airfield," Agent Mitchell said, already coordinating with tactical teams. "Your teams won't make it in time," Vincent replied, "but mine will." I stood, grabbing his arm. "No. Vincent, you can't just go execute him. That's not justice." "Emma," he said gently, covering my hand with his. "Sometimes justice and the law aren't the same thing. If you kill him, you become just like them." Vincent's expression softened. "No, Karamia. If I don't stop him, more women die. That's the difference." Before I could argue further, Agent Mitchell's radio crackled with urgent reports. "Ma'am, we've got a problem. The primary target locations are empty. It looks like they cleared out hours ago." "All of them?" "All but one. Team 3 reports potential hostages at the Brooklyn warehouse. But it could be a trap." Vincent was already moving toward the door. "It's not a trap. It's bait. Petrov is trying to draw law enforcement resources away from his escape route." "How do you know?" Agent Mitchell demanded, "because it's what I would do in his situation." Vincent paused at the door, looking back at me. "Emma, stay here until this is over. I'll come back for you." "Vincent, wait." But he was already gone, leaving me surrounded by federal agents and evidence of crimes I'd helped facilitate. Through the conference room windows, I could see the city lights spreading out like a circuit board, each point of light representing lives that would be affected by what happened in the next few hours. "Agent Mitchell," I said, sudden certainty filling my voice. "I need to go with the team heading to the warehouse." "Absolutely not. You're a civilian witness, not an agent." "I'm the person who understands their organizational structure better than anyone in this room," I countered. "If there are women being held there, if Petrov is using them as bait, you need someone who can read the situation correctly." Rachel stood beside me. "She's right. Emma understands these people in ways you don't." Agent Mitchell studied my face, clearly weighing protocols against practical necessity. "This could be extremely dangerous." "More dangerous than what I've already survived?" "Fine. But you stay behind cover, follow orders absolutely, and if I tell you to run, you run." 15 minutes later, I was in a federal vehicle racing through Brooklyn toward a warehouse that might contain enslaved women, or might be a trap designed to kill law enforcement officers. Either way, it was where the story that began in a broken elevator 6 days ago would finally end. The warehouse district was a maze of industrial buildings and abandoned lots, shadows and silence broken only by the distant sound of traffic from the highway. Our convoy stopped 2 blocks away, federal agents coordinating with SWAT teams and tactical units in movements that looked choreographed but felt like barely controlled chaos. Heat signatures confirm approximately 15 people inside, the tactical commander reported. Could be hostages, could be hostiles, could be both. Structural analysis indicates multiple exit routes, another agent added. If this is a trap, they have plenty of ways to escape or counterattack. I studied the warehouse through binoculars, noting the careful positioning of vehicles around the building, the way shadows fell to create blind spots for surveillance, the industrial loading docks that could hide anything from legitimate cargo to human trafficking operations. That's not how they operate, I said, realizing something that had been nagging at me. The Albanian corporation uses legitimate businesses as cover. This warehouse is too isolated, too obvious. What are you saying? Agent Mitchell asked. I'm saying this feels wrong. Their pattern is to hide in plain sight. Restaurants, hotels, apartment buildings where screaming wouldn't be unusual. I lowered the binoculars, pieces of the puzzle clicking together in my mind. This isn't an operational site. It's a disposal site. The implications of my words hit everyone simultaneously. We weren't racing to rescue trafficking victims. We were potentially walking into a crime scene where evidence, including human evidence, was being eliminated. All teams, exercise extreme caution, Agent Mitchell radioed. We may be dealing with active elimination of witnesses. The tactical approach took another 20 minutes. Careful movements designed to minimize risk while maximizing the chance of finding anyone still alive. I waited behind armored vehicles, my heart hammering against my ribs as I listened to radio chatter that made the situation inside sound worse with each update. Multiple victims confirmed, came the report that made my stomach lurch. Some still alive, but barely. Medical teams needed immediately. How many? Agent Mitchell demanded. 12 women, Eastern European, ages approximately 18 to 25. Severe trauma, possible drug overdoses. It looks like they were being prepared for disposal. I closed my eyes against the horror of what those clinical words represented. 12 young women who had come to America seeking better lives, who had instead found themselves trapped in a nightmare that nearly ended in their murder. Petrov? Agent Mitchell asked. Gone. But he left something behind. 20 minutes later, I was standing in the warehouse surrounded by evidence of cruelty that would haunt me for the rest of my life. The women had been rescued, rushed to hospitals where they would receive the medical care and trauma counseling they desperately needed, but the psychological scars of what they'd endured would take much longer to heal. Ms. Hartley, one of the tactical agents called, approaching with an envelope marked with my name in block letters. This was left specifically for you. I opened it with trembling hands, finding a single sheet of paper with a message written in precise handwriting. You chose the wrong side, Ms. Hartley. This war is not over. We will remember your betrayal. It was signed simply, K. Petrov. He got away, I said, showing the note to Agent Mitchell. For now. But we've dismantled his entire North American operation, rescued dozens of victims, and seized millions in assets. He'll resurface eventually, and when he does, we'll be waiting. A commotion near the warehouse entrance drew our attention. Vincent appeared, flanked by 2 men I recognized as his security detail. His expression was grim as he approached us. Is everyone safe? He asked, his eyes immediately finding mine. The women are being treated, Agent Mitchell replied. But Petrov escaped. No, Vincent said quietly. He didn't. Something in his tone made me look at him sharply. Vincent, what did you do? What needed to be done? He reached into his jacket and withdrew a smartphone, showing us a news report from a local New Jersey station. Private aircraft crashed during takeoff at Teterboro Airport approximately 40 minutes ago. No survivors. The headline confirmed what his expression had already told me. Kristak Petrov was dead, along with what the report described as several associates of Albanian Import Corporation. How? Agent Mitchell asked. Vincent's smile was cold as winter. Mechanical failure. Very unfortunate. But aircraft can be unreliable, especially when they haven't been properly maintained. I stared at him, understanding exactly what he was telling us. The crash hadn't been an accident. Vincent's people had sabotaged Petrov's escape aircraft, ensuring he would never rebuild his trafficking operation somewhere else. You killed them, I said. I eliminated a threat that would have escaped justice through legal channels, Vincent corrected. Those 12 women in this warehouse? They would have been murdered tonight if we'd waited for federal bureaucracy to coordinate international arrests. Agent Mitchell's expression was carefully neutral. Mr. Castellano, I hope you understand that I can't officially condone vigilante justice. And I hope you understand that sometimes unofficial solutions are the only ones that work, Vincent replied. I looked around the warehouse, taking in the evidence of rescued lives and prevented murders. The careful balance between law enforcement and organized crime that had made tonight's success possible. Everything I'd believed about justice and law and proper procedures had been challenged over the past week. Is it over? I asked. The Albanian trafficking operation is finished, Vincent confirmed. The women will be safe. The monsters who hurt them are dead. And us? Vincent stepped closer, his presence warm and solid in the warehouse's industrial coldness. That depends on what you want, Emma. I thought about the choices that had brought me here. The decision to help instead of running. The choice to trust a dangerous man. The realization that sometimes justice operated outside legal boundaries. I want to go home, I said. With you. Vincent's smile was gentle, transforming his face from coldly dangerous to something warm and human. Then let's go home. As we walked out of the warehouse together, past federal agents and rescued victims, and evidence of crimes that would never be repeated, I realized that home had become something I'd never expected. Not a place, but a person. Not safety from the world's dangers, but someone willing to face those dangers beside me. The elevator that had started this story had been broken, trapping me with a stranger who became my salvation. Now, walking into an uncertain future with Vincent Castellano, I understood that sometimes the best things in life came from the moments when everything fell apart. Behind us, Agent Mitchell was coordinating the largest anti-trafficking victory in federal history. Ahead of us, the city spread out like a promise of new beginnings. And beside me walked a man who had shown me that love and danger could coexist, that protection and possession could be the same thing, and that sometimes the most important choice was simply whom to trust when everything else crumbled. 6 months later, I would become the legal counsel for Castellano Family Enterprises, helping to legitimize businesses that had operated in gray areas for 3 generations. I would use my skills to protect workers' rights, fight housing discrimination, and ensure that the family's community protection services operated within legal bounds whenever possible. I would also become Vincent Castellano's wife, choosing a life that balanced corporate law with occasional danger, legitimate business with family obligations that sometimes required looking the other way. But that night, walking out of a Brooklyn warehouse with a man who had killed to protect the innocent, all I knew was that I had finally found something worth fighting for, and someone worth trusting with my life, my future, and my heart. The story that began with a broken elevator and a mistaken identity had become something else entirely. A love story written in shadows and violence, a partnership forged in fire and blood, a future built on the understanding that sometimes the most important laws were the ones written in the human heart.